Hello, today I'd like to talk about how to become powerful in Fallout 76, specifically in combat. In the last two videos we covered weapons, armor and consumables to buff your offense and defense. In the single player games that would mostly be all you need to worry about, but in Fallout 76, perks have a lot more impact. In this video we'll cover general combat bonuses that you get from perks. These are the ones you want on regardless of your style. Then we'll cover perks that apply to VATS and low health strategies specifically. In the follow-up video we'll cover mutations, so subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to be notified when the next part gets released. I'll split this into classes. Weapon and general damage perks should always be active, but others like the ones that buff explosives depend on your build. Each weapon type has a set of 3 tiers of damage buffing perks. The lowest is named after the weapon, so the perk for heavy weapons is just called heavy weapons. The second and last tiers are called Expert and Master. All tiers do the same thing, the only difference is what level they become available at. The first level gives you a 10% bonus to damage, and each can be upgraded to level 3 with an extra 5% bonus for each level. So you can get a maximum of 20% damage from each tier, for a total of 60% if you spend 9 perk points. If you're struggling for perk points, then a tip is that it's more efficient to start with one level of each tier for a 30% damage bonus, but only using 3 perks. That 30% should be the minimum, and you can add more levels as you get more perk points. Heavy weapons perks go under strength, which unfortunately has a lot of great perks. I currently spend 6 perk points for 45% more damage because I also need to have weight reduction perks. Pistols and rifles have separate perks for single shot and automatic versions. So for rifles, you should get commando perks if you use automatic receivers, and rifleman perks if you use single shot. They're found under perception, where you also find the archer perks. It's the same deal with pistols, guerrilla for automatics and gunslinger for single shot pistols under agility. For melee weapons, they're divided between unarmed, single hand, and 2-hand weapons, and are found under strength. All the damage perks for specific weapons work in the same way and give you a percentage increase to your weapon's damage. There's 2 perks that buff explosives. Demolition or Under Intelligence increases the damage by up to 60% at level 5, and Grenadier Under Perception doubles the explosion radius at level 2. These perks obviously apply to grenades, but they also apply to explosive weapons like launchers and weapons with the explosive legendary effect. So if you happen to regularly use some of these, like say Foundation's Vengeance, then it's not a bad idea to equip them together with the weapon buffing perks for an even bigger buff. It's worth mentioning that if you use launchers, you can pretty much ignore the heavy weapons perks because the physical damage from missiles and mini-nukes is basically nothing. Just focus on the explosive perks instead. The one exception is the Brotherhood Hellstorm launcher. That has a bit of physical damage, but it's not really worth the effort to get the launcher. Most weapon types also have specific perks for armor piercing. This is pretty important as you go up levels, and especially against boss type enemies. If you use heavy weapons, then you should use power armor and the stabilized perk under intelligence. It gives you an inherent armor piercing ability with any heavy weapon and makes you more accurate on top of that. It's a no-brainer. If you use rifles or pistols, Tank Killer is a must to enhance your hitting ability. Archers can use bow before me. The problem is that they're under perception, and the rifle and bow buffing perks are also under perception, so you might not be able to take them all. Pistol buffing perks are less of an issue because they're under agility instead. Melee gets Incisor and Martial Artist under strength. Incisor allows you to ignore up to 75% of enemy armor. That's the biggest armor piercing bonus in the game. And Martial Artist allows you to hit faster. Both are very useful, but just like with rifles, the weapon damage perks are under strength, so you might have to sacrifice something. But pair them up with a chainsaw or an auto axe and you'll understand why so many people love these weapons. Shotguns don't get armor piercing perks, but they do get Enforcer under agility. It doesn't read like much, but the key is that this is a straight chance regardless of armor or damage reduction. Even powerful enemies like Deathclaws and Assaultrons get crippled almost immediately if you have level 3 of this perk. Shotguns aren't very useful as damage dealers after you reach a high level because each pellet has to penetrate armor and resistances individually. So even if the damage numbers are the same, in actual combat they're not as effective as other weapons, but they're amazing at crippling enemies. You'll almost feel sorry for Deathclaws or any melee enemy once you start using this combination. Other weapons also have crippling perks. One Gun Army for heavy weapons, Mono and Renegade for pistols, and Tormentor for rifles, give you up to 15% chance to cripple, but they don't trigger often enough to be worth the perk points. It's better to just focus on doing enough damage to kill enemies instead. Enforcer works with shotguns because each pellet has a chance to cripple and there's a lot of pellets. Aside from the weapon specific ones, you can also get general damage bonuses. Bloody Mess on the luck gives you a straight plus 15% damage at tier 3. It's good to have for all builds if you can spare the points. Another one that you might overlook is Adrenaline Rush under agility. It allows you to accumulate plus 10% damage for each enemy killed, up to plus 60% with level 5, but it only lasts for 30 seconds. If you can, it's better to just increase the damage your weapons do, but it's definitely useful when you're fighting a lot of enemies like in events or daily operations. Tenderizer under Charisma makes enemies you hit take up to 10% more damage for 10 seconds. It works best against bosses when you have teammates also attacking them at the same time, but it's still useful if you have a low damage but high firing weapon like a minigun. Glow Sight gives you a pretty big bonus against glowing enemies. Normally I recommend against perks like Exterminator that only affect some enemy types, but once you reach high enough levels, you'll often run into glowing versions of enemies that are a bit tougher than the normal versions. One perk point gives you a nice 20% damage bonus against these tougher versions, but it's probably not worth 3 perk points unless you're really struggling for choice. The sneak damage perks give you a decent bonus. Cover Operative adds 0.5 to your damage at tier 3. It's okay if you play stealthy and you need a little bit of extra damage to get that one-shot kill to stay in stealth. So they're okay while you're questing or just exploring, but in daily ops or events they're not that useful. Same with Ninja for melee. It's nice, but because you'll be immediately detected, it's better to get a chainsaw or auto axe and just rip and tear if you go melee. All of these are nice when the situation calls for it, but it's generally better to focus on raising your overall damage rather than damage bonuses that only work in specific situations. Unlike single player games, there's a lot of perks in Fallout 76 that can make you very tanky even if you're naked. There's quite a lot of perks that raise your damage and energy resistance, but personally I would not recommend any of them because of the diminishing returns from resistance compared to reduction. Many of these also only work outside power armor, so they might be worth it early on when your armor is weak and you're desperate for any kind of protection. So Barbarian, Bullet Shield, Refractor, Ironclad, Bodyguards, Evasive, Moving Target, and Junk Shield are only worth it if you have spare perk points. If they gave you a bigger bonus, say 100 instead of 45 max, they might be worth looking at, but even then in the long term you'll be replacing them. Personally I would just recommend using power armor instead until you can get a good set of normal gear like the Boss Recon or Secret Service armor. These are the perks you should prioritize. Damage reduction perks also work in power armor, so they should be your priority if you go in that direction. As always, they work in a multiplicative fashion, but if you combine them, the effect can be pretty strong. Dodgy gives you a straight 30% damage reduction as long as you have action points left. There's no reason not to have this one, and it's a good idea to also pack Nuka Candy, popcorn, or even coffee to restore your AP, because when you're under heavy fire, you might find yourself with 0 action points. Ricochet has an 18% chance to reduce some of your damage by sending it back. The enemy takes 25% of the damage of their own weapon, but your own weapon's special effects and your perks also apply. So if you have a vampiric weapon, it'll heal you, and perks like Tenderizer will affect the enemy. It works before Dodgy and they complement each other well. Fireproof is also one of the few ways to protect yourself against fire, and it's great if you also use explosives to avoid blowing yourself up. Recommended for any style unless you get the legendary version. There's also a few other situational ones that I can't personally recommend, but you might find them useful for the way you play. Blocker works against melee attacks, but it's better to invest in faster ways to kill enemies before they get too close. Suppressor is pretty nice against bosses that do a lot of damage. If you use automatic weapons, then you can keep the effect on them all the time. Like Tenderizer, it's good if you're by yourself, but it works better if you're in a team with other players. If you don't join a group, then Lone Wanderer will reduce your damage by 20% and boost your AP refresh. But it's not a good choice because you miss out on the extra experience from the casual group intelligence boost, plus mutations we'll cover later. Aside from the general bonuses we discussed previously, there's a bunch of perks that only apply to VATS. Concentrated fire under perception will allow you to target specific parts of an enemy, and more levels will make it more accurate. At least one level is a must, because you can then target headshots or other weak points. Action Boy under Agility is a good one because it'll boost your AP refresh. The perk is still worth getting even if you don't use VATS, because your sprint uses up AP, so it's useful even if it's just for moving faster. Grim Reaper's sprint has a 35% chance to refill your AP with every VATS kill. Both are nice to have, but neither is an absolute must, because you can replace them with consumables instead. The easiest ones to get are Nuka Candy, Popcorn and Coffee, because they all come from machines that players can have in their camps. Gun Fu under Agility is nice against a bunch of weak enemies, because you can kill a bunch of them in the same VATS session. But weak enemies don't really require extra damage, so I wouldn't recommend that, unless you have spare perk points. Usually it's the strong enemies that you have to worry about. Using VATS for targeting is beneficial, especially for players who might not be good at twitchy shooting games. But for maximum benefit, you should also focus on criticals. Having high luck helps you fill your critical meter faster, and luckily most of the VATS perks are under luck, so that combines well. Better criticals gives you up to double damage for crits. Critical Savvy allows you to use up less of your critical meter for every critical. 4-Leaf Clover has up to 13.5% chance to fill your crit meter after every hit. You get the most benefit from weapons like pistols that use low action points. Psychopath on the other hand has up to 15% chance to fill your critical meter after every VATS kill. This one works best with weapons that do high damage per shot. But having high luck means that you'll naturally refill your critical meter faster, so you get diminishing returns from 4-Leaf Clover and Psychopath. Some people have said that luck 15 is enough to fill your critical bar with 2 shots if you use Critical Savvy level 3, and level 34 is enough to allow you to use a critical every second shot. I've played around with a full unyielding set and got my luck to 33. Every so often you have to do 2 normal shots, but you're basically spamming criticals. Criticals supposedly bypass enemy resistances, so they're particularly effective against bosses. But even if that's not completely true, the extra damage from criticals is not something to scoff at. I haven't done any PvP myself, but from what people say, it seems that VATS criticals are the key to winning those battles. For people who are interested in that, they should look into the details. And of course, you can also call on the good old mysterious stranger to help you out with your VATS hits. The Bloody Build takes advantage of properties that kick in when you're at low health. There's a few perks that you can also take advantage of. Serendipity is a very important one. It has a 45% chance to completely avoid all damage if you're at 30% health or below. Every second hit just misses. Nerd Rage is a nice all-around bonus that kicks in when you're below 20% health. You get 40 more damage resistance, you do 20% more damage, and get 15% more action point refresh. Normally they're both nice to have perks, but not very beneficial because they only trigger when your health is low, so they help you stay alive when you might have otherwise died. But they're not really worth the perk points if you play with full health. But if you permanently keep your health low, then both are always active, and you get big benefits from maxing them. Most people keep their health low by having high radiation levels, that way they can never have more than 20% health. If you do that, then another good perk is Ready Cool, which gives you an extra 5 strength bonus. With the bonuses from Unyielding Armor, your total strength will be pretty high even if you didn't invest that many points in that ability. So if you happen to see players with high radiation levels, don't share cards that heal radiation. That will get you kicked out of the team. Perks are very powerful tools to enhance your ability to kill enemies while staying alive. Don't neglect them. Having the right perks is just as important as having godly weapons or armor. Next time we'll cover mutations, because they can further enhance your chosen style. See you then. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when new videos come out. See you soon.